Hello everyone, you're watching the channel Stories of Our Life. Friends, make yourselves comfortable. I wish you to truly enjoy listening to this life story.
Laura tried to open the front door, but she couldn't do it. Why? Maybe my neighbor's dog is bothering me? Laura thought. The old dog Buddy was a huge German shepherd. But because of his age and peaceful nature, it walked freely around the village. Tired of walking, it could lie down anywhere and even cause temporary inconvenience. Buddy. Laura called out, "Get out of here." Laura tried again to push the front door. Outside the front door it grumbled and hissed, and only then the door finally opened. As she stepped through the resulting opening, Laura was about to stroke Buddy on the head, but it wasn't a dog. A man was sitting near the entrance to the house. Judging by his clothes, he was not a local one. A three-piece suit and a former white shirt were in no way typical of the appearance of men who lived in this area. Were guests visiting someone? Why didn't the hosts lose him then? Or are they in the same condition? Just in case, after shouting to her Maggie and making her sit at the gate, Laura closed the front door and went about her business. Charlotte was still asleep, and when she woke up she won't leave the house at once anyway, waiting for her mother. Nevertheless, Laura was in a hurry. An unfamiliar man asleep at the gate, and a whole list of things to do did not let her relax. She had to go quickly to Aunt Eva for milk and then to the other end of the village, to the local store, for sugar. As she approached the house, Laura saw that the man was no longer lying at the entrance to her house, but was sitting leaning over him and holding his hands to his head. "Man. It's time to return home," the woman addressed him softly. "Who have you come to see?" The man looked up, and Laura saw that he was quite young. The handsome manly face and bright blue eyes shocked Laura for a moment. But she resisted temptation and turned again to the man. "If you can't remember the way, you tell me the name of your relatives. I'll go get them myself." "I don't remember." "Where am I?" The guy looked confused and depressed. "What have they given you to drink?" Laura thought, and said aloud, "All right. I have no time. If you remember, knock." The man lowered his head again. Laura went into her yard, and as she closed the front door behind her, she instantly forgot about the man. The only things on her mind were the things she had planned for today. And there were quite a few. And first of all, it was necessary to feed her daughter breakfast. Charlotte was not yet awake. Laura began to make porridge, and when it was ready she woke Charlotte up. While the girl washed her face, her mother set the table. They ate breakfast. After sending her daughter to make the bed and put away the toys that had been scattered since the evening, Laura washed the dishes and began to cook dinner. "We still have to go to Caden. Some wood was brought in yesterday, it needs sawing and chopping." Laura had some tools left over from her husband, including a saw, but she never learned how to use it. "We had to ask Caden, the only helper in the village for single women." Caden's work was inexpensive, but it took him a long time to do it and he could go on a binge in the meantime. Laura went outside with her daughter. "Mom, who's that?" asked Charlotte in surprise, pointing to the morning man, who continued to sit outside their front door. "Are you still here?" asked Laura grudgingly. "I'm sorry, I don't know where to go and I don't remember my name either." "I'm so sorry," the man's accent was not local. But that was not what surprised Laura. Now, fully recovered, he seemed intelligent. "Don't you remember anything at all?" The man shook his head guiltily. "All right, I'll show you to the villagers, maybe someone will recognize you." Taking her daughter by the hand, Laura headed toward Caden. Caden, besides being the chief helper in the village, knew all the local news. And about newcomers especially, first of all, their name, to whom, for how long and why they came. But Caden was lying unconscious. Beside him lay an empty bottle of alcohol. Laura sighed, judging by the bottle, Caden had only recently started drinking. So she wouldn't be expecting him for the next couple of days. On the way back she stopped by Madison, the one who sold alcohol in the village. She knew about all the news, too. Caden was telling her. "Madison. Do you know who we have guests visiting? Laura asked after saying hello, entering Madison's yard. Madison went outside. She didn't know anything. No one came to see us. Only Caden came by yesterday for alcohol. No. Of course, they could have bought at another store, but you know only fools go there. And this one, as you say, is intelligent. Maybe he brought it with him? I don't know. Why don't you go and see him? Laura looked hopefully at Madison. They walked out and together headed toward Laura's house. The street was empty. No occupants could be seen behind the high, dense fences. The village seemed to be extinct. Hey, boy, whose are you? Shouted Madison, leaning over to the man who was still sitting by the fence, apparently asleep again. He flinched and opened his eyes. Don't scream, please. My head really hurts. He covered himself with his hands from Madison. No, Laura. He doesn't look like any of the locals. He must have fallen over the moon. Madison laughed out loud at her joke. Okay, if I hear any news about your lunatic, I'll let you know. Waving goodbye, Madison left. I'm sorry, I know this sounds crazy, but could you feed me? The man turned to Laura. I just don't know how I can repay you for this, but please, I'm really hungry. Laura wondered. She lived alone with her daughter. Her husband had died in the woods 2 years ago. Now a completely unfamiliar stranger was asking to come to her house. Behind the fence, Maggie yapped weakly, as if asking, why don't you come home? Do you know how to saw? The woman turned to the guy. He looked at her in surprise. I guess. I don't remember. You'll remember. Let's go to lunch, and she, without looking back, headed for her house. The stranger's appetite was enviable. Charlotte looked at him with huge surprised eyes, so Laura sometimes had to make remarks to her daughter. Charlotte. Eat. It's not nice to watch a man eat like that. After they had eaten, the man stood up and inquired, well, where's the saw? There, in the pantry. But you have to change first. I'll get you clothes. Laura brought her husband's work clothes. Although her husband was a rather large man, his clothes absolutely fit the guest. What's your name? Laura brought a mug of water. The man finished another tree, put the saw down, and walked over to her. I don't remember. Really, he started working again. I'll let you think of a name for me. Laura shook her head and, without saying anything, went into the house. While she cooked dinner, thought, what should she do with a stranger? No acquaintances who would have identified him appeared. Among his clothes, which he had left in the house, having changed to work clothes, there were no signs to identify him. Except his suit. It was of very good quality, though dirty. The man was clearly a city dweller. He also had a watch, a beautiful, large, gold-looking watch. Laura put it away in her closet. After sending Charlotte to water the vegetable garden, Laura went to her unidentified worker. He continued to toil diligently. Let's go to dinner. You've done a good job tonight. The man finished his work in silence. After cleaning the saw, he took it to the storeroom. Laura brought out a towel and clean clothes. You can wash yourself in the summer shower. There's everything there. Again the man, silently taking his things, headed in the direction indicated. He ate with great appetite. They dined in silence. Finally, Laura couldn't stand it. Honestly, I don't know what to do with you. Have you thought of a name for me? No. I don't know. What about the name Jaden? Laura looked at him uncertainly. So be it. He took a sip of his tea. I don't want to disturb you. I understand that you are afraid of me, and I don't blame you for that. That is why I shall sleep where I am tonight. No. I'm not afraid of you at all. Though a moment ago Laura was really worried about her and her daughter's fate in letting a stranger into the house. And I won't let you under the fence. You can stay in the summer kitchen. There's not much room, of course, but there's everything you need to sleep in it. I'll give you an old TV set. It works. And if you can fix it, you can watch something. Are you sure? Jaden's gaze was stern and serious. Like Laura's boss. Yes. I can lock myself out of the house, after all. I have a Maggie and a shotgun. So if you want to hurt us in any way, you can't have it. Laura tried to speak in a joking tone, but her look was very troubled. The man came so close to her that she felt the warmth of his body. He took her hand and looked at her so affectionately and penetratingly that Laura began to worry. I will never do anything to hurt you. Never, he kissed her palm. Thank you for a lovely dinner and good night. Jaden had long since left the house, and Laura still stood there, holding the kissed hand, unable to move. The last time she had been touched by a man was 2 years ago. That was the last time she had seen her husband alive. He kissed her the same way and walked out the doorstep. And never came back. Mom. Read me a story. Charlotte brought Laura back from her musings to life. Come on. Jaden lay on the old couch and looked up at the ceiling. He was feeling much better than he had in the morning, but his memory had not returned. The area where he found himself, and the people he had seen during the day while he was sawing firewood, did nothing to clarify the situation or help in unraveling how he had ended up in this condition. But that was of little concern to him now. At first, he thought the woman who had allowed him into the house was no longer young. The scarf that almost covered her eyes, the clothes that looked like a shapeless sack, all carefully concealed her true age. But in the evening, when she went out to call him in for dinner, Laura changed into her homemade costume. She wore a plain chintz robe. Her long braid and young face with huge blue eyes were exposed. Thus she looked like her daughter's older sister. At the sight of her, Jaden was speechless and embarrassed. He did not know how old he was, but he felt that he was considerably older than Laura. Laura awoke to a knock outside. She looked out the window and saw Jaden. He was working as if he had been splitting firewood all his life. Strange, thought Laura, you wouldn't tell by his hands that he was used to hard work. Remembering his large but gentle hands, Laura blushed. She was marrying her Alfie as a completely innocent girl. Laura's grandmother, who had raised her, had accustomed her to austerity. Even on her first wedding night, Laura was so nervous and frightened that her husband decided to postpone performing his marital duty. For 2 whole months, Alfie, as a loving and caring husband, nursed Laura back to health. When this happened, Laura cried in pain and shame for a long time. The distraught Alfie comforted and coaxed her, and then said, "Suit yourself. Get used to it. It's your direct duty." Laura had to accept her fate. Alfie was a caring and loving husband. He did not drink, did not beat her, gave her gifts, unlike the husbands of her village friends. During the day she was the happiest woman, but at night, she had to do her duty to her husband. He did not demand love from her every night and tried, if possible, to do everything quickly. And after Laura became pregnant, he did not touch her at all. Laura breathed a sigh of relief. When Charlotte was born, a couple of months later, Alfie again asked her to perform her marital duties. Laura went to bed with her husband with fear and despair. Apparently, after pregnancy and childbirth, something had changed in her body. She experienced such feelings that she wondered how she could have been so adamant before. A passionate and ardent wife awakened in her. After Alfie died, Laura made a promise to herself that another man would never touch her. But after Jaden's touch last night, she was afraid. For a moment she thought she wanted more. Jaden was working waist-deep naked. His back was glistening with sweat and his strong muscles were visible. Laura moved quickly away from the window. Her heart was racing and her palms were sweating. No. No. No and no again. It offends the memory of Alfie. The girl left for the shower. Sprawled half the night without sleep on the old couch in the summer kitchen, Jaden fell asleep in the morning. He dreamed some scraps of his past life, but when he woke up, he couldn't remember anything. But the image of Laura in a light robe and sloppy hair stuck in his mind. His imagination immediately invented new images of the girl in a more undressed version. A cool shower didn't help. Jaden decided to distract himself with work. So as not to wake the villagers with the noise of the saw, he decided to start chopping wood. Good morning. Who are these guests of our Laura, whom she makes work in the morning? From the road Jaden looked at a girl full, but with a pronounced figure. A bright sundress weakly held her full chest, a thin waist was pulled down by a belt, one hand rested on her hip. In general, a dream, not a girl. In the other hand she had a collar strap, which was worn around the neck of the goat. Without waiting for an answer, the girl slowly held out her hand to Jaden. My name is Amelia. I'm Jaden. The man wiped his hand on his pants and shook her palm. He looked like a fool. On the one hand, the girl had impressed him with her figure, especially after his morning fantasies. On the other hand, he didn't know what he could tell her about himself except his name. And even then, it was an invented one. What a serious, taciturn young man. Not like our local men, continued Amelia, still smiling alluringly. Are you here with your wife? Jaden looked at her stupidly. I have a goat to take to pasture. I hope it won't be the last time we see each other. Amelia smiled promisingly, and wiggled her hips invitingly toward the woods. You're getting used to it fine. Laura's voice brought him back to his senses. He turned around. She was standing at the gate. Laura was the exact opposite of Amelia. Thin and airy, she seemed weightless. A halo of loose hair made her look like an angel. He wanted to grab her and hold her against him before she disappeared. I'm going to get some milk. I'll be back and we'll have breakfast. Laura, trying not to show the impression that Jaden was having with the local beauty Amelia, walked past him onto the road. Laura walked and was angry at herself for taking too personally the kiss of thanks and Jaden's words last night. She was angry that she had admired him looking out the window. She was angry that instead of her usual casual dress, she'd worn what she thought was a frivolous sundress last time and had a different hairstyle instead of a braid. She had only dressed like that on holidays. To her displeasure, Aunt Eva noticed her outfit, too. Are you going into town? She asked without interest. I was. But I changed my mind. I didn't have time to change. Ah. Did they say you had a guest? Aunt Eva looked at Laura with interest. No. He's just a stranger. Asked to stay. Yes. And Madison said you found him by the fence. Allegedly, he had no memory. Well, that's not exactly true. He remembers going somewhere. I don't remember where he was going. He's asked to stay with me until he remembers. Laura made it up. Be careful. After all, you live alone, with a child. There's no one to stand up for you, Aunt Eva began to warn Laura. It will be all right. He's calm. I have Maggie and the gun to look after me. That's good. But still, be careful. Thank you, Aunt Eva. I'm off. Laura replied lightheartedly. Jaden continued chopping wood alone. It was a weekday, and that's why Amelia ended up next to him, thought Laura with a chuckle. And aloud she asked, what do you prefer for breakfast? Jaden turned to Laura, lowering his axe, and the girl involuntarily began to admire him. Up close, he seemed even more muscular. I don't know, he replied, and smiled. Then we'll have porridge, replied Laura irritably, and went in the direction of the front door. Jaden looked after her thoughtfully. When Jaden entered the kitchen, Laura's irritation was gone. She tried to distract herself and set the table. When she saw the man looking at the porridge with interest, she laughed. I see this is the first time you've had such a breakfast. It's all right, you'll get tied up. Even though I'm on vacation, I still make myself and my daughter the same dish to save time. It's especially good to have porridge in the morning. But I have coffee, if you want. Yes, thank you. I am not picky. But I wouldn't say no to coffee. They ate breakfast in silence. Laura was pondering the plan for the day, and Jaden was afraid to break the silence. Finally, when Laura poured him coffee, he dared to say, "Laura, can I ask you one thing?" Laura looked at him questioningly. "Address me as a you. I don't feel comfortable. I'm in no position to be addressed so formally." "Okay. I feel too old that way, too. And about your situation. Something like that can happen to anybody. I don't think it's your fault. So we're going to be friends?" Jaden held out his hand across the table to Laura. Of course, she placed her hand in his palm, slightly worried, and immediately felt a light, gentle shake. "Great." Jaden let go of her hand and continued drinking his coffee. "And another thing, if I've come into your life so suddenly, I wouldn't want to get in your way in any way. Naturally, I take care of all the men's chores around the house. But I wouldn't want to live off you. Is it possible to get a job here?" Laura was speechless with surprise. Jaden had gone from a handsome, sexy man to a very responsible and decent man. Staring at him in amazement, she sat there, unable to move or respond. "You think about it, please," Jaden said, getting up from the table. "If you don't think of anything, I'll go look for something myself as soon as I put the wood away." He left the house, and Laura, astonished, remained seated at the table. She came to her senses only when Charlotte, having finished her porridge and drunk her tea, got up and picked up the dishes from the table and took them to the sink. The girl washed the dishes, wiped down the table, swept the kitchen floor, and began peeling potatoes for the soup for lunch. The day promised to be hot. After lunch, the sun was so warm that Laura said to Jaden, "Shall we go to the river? Working with an axe in this heat is hell." "Yay!" "We go swimming." Clapping her hands, Charlotte began to jump. Jaden smiled broadly. "I'd love to. Only I don't have the right outfit." Laura blushed. "It's all right, I'll find it. My husband had some. I think they'll fit you." Seeing Jaden's look, she blushed even more and added, "Don't worry, they're clean." "I don't doubt it at all," the man replied, still smiling broadly and looking at Laura cheerfully. Her reaction surprised him, and at the same time he was filled with tenderness for this girl. He could barely contain himself from hugging her. How old is she? Thought Jaden as he watched Laura and her daughter bathing merrily. No more than 25. Or maybe less. Early marriage is common in the village. And me, I wonder, how old? I shall have to look myself carefully in the mirror. "Uncle Jaden. Come to us," cried Charlotte. The man, putting his thoughts aside, dived into the river. They had fun swimming, squealing, playing catch-up. It was a good thing there was no one else besides them. The adult population of the village was working, and the children had their own place to swim, farther and deeper. Laura, running away from Charlotte, stumbled and, without realizing it, grabbed hold of Jaden to keep her balance. But he, too, fell into the water in surprise. Laura fell right on top of him, trapped in his arms. Trying to get up, she looked at Jaden. He was looking at her the way a man looks at a woman when he's about to make love to her. Just a little more and she wouldn't even resist. His gaze dropped to her lips, which opened involuntarily. His face moved closer to hers. Charlotte fell on top of them with a joyful squeal. They came to their senses and moved away from each other. "It's time to go home," Laura said, trying not to look Jaden in the eye. Charlotte's lips are already blue, she's cold. "Yeah, it's about time." Jaden hid his gaze, too. If this continued, he would soon be unable to restrain himself. And then either he would hurt the girl, or he would lose his mind. Something had to be done immediately. Work. Hard work would save him. Returning home, he quickly changed his clothes and continued chopping wood. Laura and Charlotte went into the house to prepare dinner. A few minutes later the door slammed. It was a disguised Charlotte who went to water the vegetable garden. It was already sunset. The villagers were returning home from their work. Some passed by without looking at Jaden. Some, on the contrary, looked at him. Some even said hello or stopped to talk, as if they were acquainted. Some tried to ask for cigarettes or offered their own. From this situation, Jaden concluded that he did not smoke. Charlotte came out of the house and sat down on a still unsawed log. "Uncle Jaden, Mom's calling for dinner, shall we go?" "Yes, Charlotte, thank you. I'll be right there," but he took his time. The intolerable desire that had arisen in him today on the river frightened him. He was sure it had never happened to him before. Or it had, but a long time ago. A very long time ago. He washed in the summer shower. Jaden worked up the courage to enter the house. Laura had already set the table. They ate in complete silence. After dinner, Jaden thanked Laura and quickly left the table. The night passed restlessly. Sometimes sleep did not come at all, and then it came over Jaden, and he forgot himself. Images of the past day came to his mind. He could feel Laura's frail, water-cool body pressed against him again. How her eyes became huge pools, drawing in their depths, and her lips opened in anticipation of a kiss. Jaden waked up. He quickly got out of bed and began to walk around his small dwelling. Something was wrong here. But what? Even in his dreams, he didn't give himself fully to his feelings, didn't follow through with what he started. Why? Jaden recalled his dream over and over again. And then he realized. He was afraid. But of what? Of intimacy with a woman? Of the woman herself? This was crazy. Jaden walked around the room again, trying to retrieve memories of the day before. Before they went to the river, he had no fear whatsoever. So it had something to do with the river. He began to remember the area around the river. On the village side was nothing special, a small field, beyond that, the village gardens, a path leading into the village. But on the other bank, there was the same field, only much bigger. That's where the villagers take the animals to graze. Behind the field were the forest. A forest. That's it. That's what scares him. Something had happened to him in that forest. We must go there and look. Maybe there would be a clue to his amnesia. With these thoughts in mind, after calming down a bit, Jaden went back to bed and went to sleep. He soon fell asleep. He dreamed again of the river, of his embrace with Laura, of her bottomless eyes, of her slightly open lips. But in the dream their passion flares up, and they consummate the affair. He was awakened by a light knock on the door. Without thinking about his appearance and still in the power of the remnants of such a beautiful dream, Jaden opened the door. On the threshold stood Laura. Without realizing what he was doing, Jaden pulled her to him, kissed her demandingly, and laid her on the bed. Laura tossed and turned in her bed all night. There was no sleep. Before her eyes was Jaden's gaze, full of passion and desire. His lips were so close that she could almost feel him kissing her. What was she thinking? All right, Jaden. He's a man. He can allow himself to act like that. But she's a woman. A mother after all. You have a daughter growing up, scolded Laura to herself. What kind of example are you setting for her? You act like a cat. After lying in bed until dawn and never falling asleep, Laura got up and went to wash her face. A plan emerged in her head, try to see Jaden as little as possible. Of course, it would not be easy, since he lived with her, but it was still possible to make their meetings as rare as possible. For example, she could get him a job. She decided to take Jaden to her boss, Patrick. Maybe he would offer some kind of job to her permanent resident? Laura put on the sundress she had worn yesterday, put a sweatshirt on top, it was still chilly, put the kettle on, and went to wake Jaden up. What happened next made her forget not only about her plans, but about everything in the world. Jaden, who had opened the door for her, didn't seem to be awake yet. No sooner had she uttered a word than he wrapped his arms around her and began kissing her. Losing control, Laura didn't notice how they ended up on the bed. It was only when his hot palm reached under her blouse that she was electrocuted. Jaden, she screamed. What are you doing? Jaden came to his senses, moved away from her, and began to stare at the girl with an incomprehensible look. Oh my God. Laura. I'm sorry, I don't know how that happened, he spoke quickly, walking over to her again and helping her out of bed. I honestly didn't mean to. I must have been dreaming about something. I got up, but I didn't finally wake up. Again, I'm so sorry. He quickly put on the sweatpants Laura had allotted him for casual wear and looked at her. What's wrong? I came to tell you that I've figured out where you can get a job, Laura said a little hesitantly. Only the person who can get you the job is leaving very early, so you have to make it in time. All right. I'll wash up now. I put the kettle on to warm up. Come in and have some coffee first. Laura almost ran out of Jaden's house. As she entered the house, she pressed her hands to her worried face and leaned against the wall. Her heart was pounding frantically. It seemed as if that pounding could be heard in the next village. What should I do? What should I do? These thoughts sat in her head. The kettle whistled in the kitchen. She quickly ran there. Patrick was still at home. Good morning, Laura, trying to sound nonchalant, entered her boss's house. Good morning, Laura, said Patrick. Don't you want to rest anymore? Did you miss your work? Get out. I'll give you unofficial days. Not yet. I haven't had enough, replied Laura, with a smile. I've come to you with a request. Take my permanent resident to work for you. Only he's a little out of his mind, but he's hardworking and doesn't drink. That's very good, Patrick stepped closer, peering at Jaden. Satisfied, he held out his hand. My name is Patrick. I take it you have no identification? Yes, Jaden replied, no memory and no identification. And why didn't he go to the police? The warden looked questioningly at Laura. He had no time. He was working for me, chopping wood, the girl replied, laughing. Why did you make the man work at once? He asked me to. He says they're spoiling the view of the street. Laura looked slyly at Jaden. All right. I'll see where I can get you. And then, if you do a good job, I'll help you with the papers. You come see me tomorrow at the same time. Okay. Thank you, Jaden smiled broadly. After shaking hands and saying, goodbye, Jaden and Laura walked leisurely toward the house. Laura became sad. I want to apologize again for what happened. I don't know what was wrong with me. And that dream. Forget it, Laura did not want to remember her weakness and the fact that she did not stop him immediately, but gave in to her feelings. I can't. I dreamt that I was afraid of something. I wondered for a long time what it was, and realized that my fright had something to do with the forest beyond the river. Before I started working, I'd like to go there. I might remember something there. Shall we go? No. I'll go alone. It might be dangerous. That's not true. There's someone out there every day. People are picking berries and mushrooms. And anyone will tell you, it's no more dangerous than going swimming. That's why I'm going with you to pick mushrooms or berries. Jaden agreed. He didn't want to involve Laura in this hike. He was afraid of something for a reason. They decided to go to the woods after breakfast. Laura gathered herself and Charlotte. Both took a basket each. Jaden was given a basket, too. Maybe you'll pick something up, too, Laura said with a laugh as she handed him the basket. Jaden didn't share her joy, but he took it. As he entered the forest, he felt a sense of excitement. Some feeling compelled him to walk farther and farther into the woods. It seemed to him that just a little while longer and he would see something that would immediately bring his memory back. Laura and her daughter followed him, picking berries at the same time. Suddenly they came out into a huge clearing. Wow, Laura wondered how far we've come. We got too carried away walking. Is that bad? Inquired Jaden blankly. It seemed to him that something was hidden from him. No, it's just that the hunting grounds start farther out. The village gatherers don't go there, it's hunters' territory. Almost without listening to Laura, Jaden went to the center of the clearing and saw the mound of grass. It was as if two planks had been lying on the grass, parallel to each other, for a long time. And next to it was an island of crumpled grass, as if something or someone had also been lying there for quite some time. Jaden crouched on this island and looked up into the sky. Suddenly a picture appeared in his brain. A helicopter was separating from the ground, and he, Jaden, was seeing it off. Then darkness set in. And some shaggy creature bent over him. There it is. That's what Jaden was afraid of, that creature. Well, did you remember something? Laura came up to him. I came here in a helicopter. I was left here to die. And then I saw, Jaden looked into Laura's eyes and suddenly noticed a movement behind her back. Looking behind the girl's back, he shouted wildly, Laura. Get behind my back. Laura turned around surprised and alarmed. She began to smile. Good afternoon, Matthew. The shaggy creature that Jaden remembered, and whom he saw at Laura's back, turned out to be the local hermit. It was a tall old man with long hair and a beard. He was dressed in a long, heel-length gray shirt, girded with the same gray cord. Hello, Laura.
Ah.
And here you are, the man in delirium. The old man turned to Jaden. Do you know him? Exclaimed Laura in amazement. A little. What do you know about me? Asked Jaden excitedly. Yes. Let's go to my place and I'll make you some currant tea. The company obediently followed the hermit from the clearing back into the woods. His small house was next to the clearing. Pouring tea into iron mugs, Matthew began. I, like any old man, do not sleep well. It was a particularly noisy night. A helicopter landed in the clearing. Some people came out of it. They were dragging a man. One asked, do you think he's alive? And the other replied, even if he's alive, he'll die here quickly. Or he will be eaten by wild animals. Abandoning the man, they got into a helicopter and flew away. I went to see who it was. It turned out to be you, Jaden. And indeed, your condition was close to death. I picked you up and carried you back to my house. Started giving you some herbal tea. And when I realized that you had recovered and would soon regain consciousness, I took you to the village at night. And why did you drop him off at my place? Asked Laura. You're a lonely girl. You could use a man in your household, the old man grinned. Amelia is lonely, too, objected Laura. Amelia is like an ordinary toy. And you must have a good fortune. Here, I planted it for you, your destiny. Laura began to look at Matthew angrily, and did not see Jaden grin contentedly. The old man saw the man's reaction and turned to him. Take care of her. This is your salvation. You've made enough mistakes in your life. She is your last salvation and your destiny. From the hermit they left thoughtfully. Only Charlotte galloped happily through the woods like a little doe. Grandfather Matthew gave her a doll bed, carved out of wood with his own hands. Finally, Jaden decided to break the silence. Well, everything is clear about my appearance. What did he say about destiny? What's that supposed to mean? As a prediction or an old man's delirium? Matthew's been a hermit for a long time now. He says nature reveals human secrets to him. The villagers go to him for advice and fortune-telling. I see. Then you are my destiny, said Jaden cheerfully. Or I am yours. Never mind. I'm not attracted to you for nothing. Out of surprise, Laura stopped. You're attracted to me, she looked Jaden straight in the eye. Yes. Don't you understand? No. Do you want me to prove it to you? How? Laura licked her suddenly dry lips. Jaden, without any words, walked over to her, hugged her, and pressed his lips to hers. Softly, gently at first, as if asking permission. Then, when Laura did not pull away, the kiss became more demanding and passionate. Without giving herself credit, Laura wrapped her arms around his neck and began to respond to the kisses. The baby's cries made them shudder and pull away from each other. Charlotte, cried Laura frightenedly. Mother. I've fallen. They heard the girl's thin voice and ran to her. Charlotte was sitting on the grass, crying and holding onto her leg. "Let me see what happened there." Jaden busily removed the girl's boot from her leg and rolled up her pants. A large abrasion was visible on her leg. "Where did you hurt yourself like that?" "I was running and my bed fell and I tripped over it and fell too." The girl's lips quivered again. "Well, you'll have to ride on my shoulders now, my dear." Jaden smiled broadly at the girl and wiped her tear-wet face with his palm. A satisfied Charlotte nodded. "What do you mean, 5 years?" Yasmin rose abruptly from her chair and, walking around the big oak table, leaned over the notary. "What do you mean, I have to live for 5 years on his administrator's donations? I am the rightful heiress. It's my money. I shouldn't have to beg for it from a stranger." "Unfortunately, the law requires it," the notary replied nonchalantly to the woman. "If your husband's body had been provided, then you could have come into the right of inheritance. But there is no body, you will have to wait 5 years." Without saying another word or even looking at the notary, Yasmin quickly left his office, slamming the door loudly. After waiting for the pounding of her heels to subside, the man picked up the telephone and dialed a number. "Albert. Good afternoon, this is Notary of Charles." "I know who you are, hello," he replied, "I am listening to you attentively. Perhaps I'm wrong, and I apologize in advance. But I think Yasmin had something to do with her husband's disappearance." "Is she so insistent about demanding an inheritance?" the interlocutor grinned. "You guessed it. Good. I see what you mean. Thank you." Albert leaned back in his chair and thought. He had never liked the new wife of Charles, his boss. It was obvious from her that all she wanted from Charles was money. But the manager of a huge holding company could not dissuade his boss from getting married. Charles, head over heels in love, married the lady. At first Albert even tried to follow the boss's young wife, but she was cautious and did nothing. He calmed down a bit, deciding that she had gotten what she wanted, to be a billionaire's wife and live her life to the fullest. But he left the call tapping feature on her phone. The day Charles disappeared, Albert heard confirmation of his suspicions. Apparently, Yasmin was dating a lover. She had always forgotten her phone at home for such meetings before, but today she apparently forgot to forget. "When will you finally get rid of that old man?" Albert heard the young man's cranky voice. "He's not very old. He's only 40, replied Yasmin with a chuckle. "He has a figure almost as good as yours." "Then maybe you don't want to part with him." The cranky voice became nervous. "Come on, my Pookie. I only love you. I don't know how to make him go away. I was hoping he would die in some of his extreme travels. But nothing gets done to him. Then it needs to get done. He needs to go somewhere urgently and die there. But where?" "Never mind," the cranky voice hushed. "I know how to do it. Only it will require money. Lots of money." "You want me to hire a hitman?" "No. He'll go on his extreme vacation and disappear there." "When, by the way, is he going there?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll make all the arrangements, and you must look for the money." Albert started to call Charles, but his phone was unavailable. Then the man started looking for him. The office said he had already left and he wasn't at home. His security guard didn't answer either. After looking for the chief for 24 hours, he could not find him. A week later news came that he was missing. Yasmin feigned grief and rushed to find her husband. But she could only get as far as the notary. Albert grinned sadly. After thinking some more, he called his old army friend. He listened to Albert, asked a few clarifying questions, and, satisfied with each other, they disconnected. "We need his corpse right away." Yasmin paced back and forth across the room. Opposite her trajectory, in a chair, sat a young, handsome, well-built man and calmly watched her movements. "Well, where are we going to get your husband's corpse now? I don't even know where they took him." "Find out. And have them bring him back. Call the executors. I'll talk to them myself." Or are we gonna wait 5 years? Okay, the guy agreed and picked up the phone. Jaden woke up in a cold sweat. He was dreaming about the clearing again. A monster was leaning over him out of the darkness, only his face was female. He sat up in bed and wondered. His unknown past did not want to leave him. He was used to not remembering anything from his past life. But that didn't bother him much now. Perhaps, as Hermit Matthew had said, this was his destiny. That afternoon, when they returned from the woods, Laura, after telling Charlotte to go to the bathroom and change, turned to Jaden and, trying not to look him in the eye, said, "Jaden, I'm sorry. But I cannot do so frivolous, to start a relationship with the first man I meet. I really like you, but it's not right. I'm a single woman with a small child. I have to have some decency. People already look at me badly enough that I have a man living with me. So what? Should I move in to start courting you?" Jaden: "I don't know." Laura: "I understand you, of course, though I feel I have a looser view of it. But I don't want to move out. Unless you kick me out, of course." "No way." Laura looked at him guiltily. "That's the deal." More than a month had passed since that conversation. Jaden went to work and still lived with Laura in the summer kitchen. Patrick praised him and set an example for the other workers. The men were not offended by him, but only chuckled and joked unkindly. "You, Jaden, at this rate, will soon replace our Patrick." "I'd try not to think about that if I were you," joked Jaden. "I'll make a mean and demanding boss." "Dash, if you were mean and demanding, you'd have seduced Laura a long time ago," remarked one of the men. "What is she, some kind of merchandise or something?" Jaden glanced angrily at his companion. "Come on, Jaden, don't be mad. It's just that after Alfie died a lot of men have been paying attention to her and she hasn't reciprocated. And you practically broke into her house. Laura is a decent girl, that's why she doesn't fall for your stupid signs of attention." Jaden was still angry that they were discussing Laura so openly, unashamedly. "She only let me in because she's kind and compassionate. And I respect her and don't allow anything unnecessary either in words or actions." "All right, you got it. Don't be angry. Our Laura got a big brother." The workers decided not to make any more jokes about Jaden. Since that kiss in the woods, Jaden no longer had a chance to even touch Laura. She was so adept at getting away from him that he lost all hope of ever getting close to her again. In the morning, after a quick breakfast, Laura would run off with Charlotte to kindergarten. Then to work. Jaden would pack his own lunch and go to work, too. In the evening, when they returned from work, they had dinner, and Laura immediately began doing chores, washing dishes, cooking, cleaning, sewing, and gardening. Jaden was not idle either, he found things to do. He had to fix the fence, fix the roof, mow the grass. They barely spoke to each other. Laura had her hands full on weekends, too. Sunday evening was the only time they could talk. But even then, for whatever reason, Laura avoided talking to Jaden. On the day of his first salary, Jaden decided to stop by the local store to buy something tasty to celebrate his first income. Amelia was in the store in all her glory. When she saw Jaden, she adjusted her blouse so that her cleavage was almost no longer covering anything and smiled broadly. "What do you want, young, handsome man?" "I want to treat a beautiful woman and her daughter to something delicious," Jaden said and looked at Amelia with a chuckle. The smile was gone from the salesman's face. "Everything's in the window," she answered quickly and pretended to be very busy. Jaden, unable to find anything better, bought candy and left the store. Laura was already warming up dinner. He put the candy and money on the table. The girl looked at him in surprise. "I wanted to buy something special with my first salary, but I don't know what exactly. So, here." He looked embarrassed. "What's the money for?" "Because I live off you enough as it is. It's for your household expenses." "But there's a lot here. I've lived here more than a day. Besides, I don't need anything, you've given me everything. So let's not argue." I can't take it. Jaden became angry. He walked over to the girl, looked her straight in the eye. Laura. Stop it. What does that mean? I've never lived off a woman, and I don't intend to. You gave me food, clothes, lodging. I just don't have the right to just take advantage of it all. So, let's not argue. Just take that money and don't embarrass me. I've got an opportunity to work on my own and, whether you want it or not, I'm going to take it. Laura, remembering how much she already owed the neighbors and the store, then obediently nodded. All right. Deal, Jaden smiled happily. After dinner, as Laura got ready to wash the dishes, the man turned to her again. Laura, there's something else I'd like to discuss with you. She nodded to her daughter to go to her room and sat down again. Waiting for Charlotte to leave, Jaden moved over to her, took her hands in his and began. Laura. If you think I've forgotten that day we had in the woods, you're wrong. I think about you every day. I can't and won't forget what happened between us. If you don't like me or anything, tell me. I won't impose on you. But if you don't and you feel something for me, let me court you. I promise I won't insist on anything. Just, let me be with you. You're already an integral part of my life, Laura sighed sadly. Okay. Let's give it a try. Just promise me that you won't betray me. And you won't make the whole village laugh at me. Never, the pleased man confidently promised her. From that evening on he hurried home every day, to have time to do all his business and to be at least a little alone with the girl. He made no attempt to turn their relationship into a more intimate one. He understood that Laura was not ready for that. But he himself was having a hard time containing himself. Something had to be done. Perhaps because of that, he was beginning to have those scary, dreamlike dreams again. He threw on a jacket of some kind, summer was ending and the mornings were getting pretty chilly, and Jaden walked out of his apartment. He sat down and thought about it without noticing when Laura was next to him. You can't sleep either, her quiet voice made him wince. And you, he answered question after question. I don't feel comfortable either. I have strange dreams. I don't remember what I dreamt, but I got really scared, and I woke up. Jaden pulled her to him. She snuggled trustingly against him, resting against his shoulder. They didn't know how long they sat like that. The neighbor's rooster sang, heralding the dawn. I'll go, the girl said quietly, and began to rise. Jaden stood up behind her. He wanted to say something to her, but the words stuck in his throat. Her braid, braided overnight, was disheveled and her unruly hair encircled her so delicate and beautiful face in a light halo. Her huge eyes stared at him as if waiting for something. The world receded into the background. Jaden, unaware of his actions, pulled her to him a little roughly, pressed his lips to hers demandingly, and froze, frightened that he had offended her. But Laura, sighing a little with a groan, pressed herself against him and wrapped her arms around his neck. Jaden kissed Laura asleep on his shoulder. She smiled happily. He wanted it to go on forever, for her to lie in his arms and smile. But the clock insistently showed that it was time to get up. Charlotte would soon wake up and might lose her mother. Laura, he whispered softly into her hair, I don't want to do this, of course, but we must get up. I'm afraid Charlotte will wake up and be frightened that you're gone. Laura reluctantly opened her eyes. Yes. Everything comes to an end sometime. She felt loved and wanted for a few hours. It was time to return to reality. The girl looked anxiously at Jaden. What if everything that had happened between them was just normal male excitement? Now that he had gotten what he wanted, he would be a regular man who, once a woman was his, would consider her a servant, ready to fulfill all his desires for affection and a little attention. The man understood her look in a peculiar way. He smiled encouragingly and kissed her lightly on the lips. Come on, I'll help you with your breakfast, and he was the first to get out of bed. Not at all embarrassed by the girl lying on the bed, Jaden walked around the room naked, picking up the clothes that were lying all over the floor because of their sudden passion. Picking up her robe as well, he held it out to Laura. She blushed and lowered her lashes. All the while he was looking for clothes, she admired his body and completely forgot that she had to hurry. Thoughts of an obscene nature flashed through her mind, totally out of touch with reality. They managed to make breakfast before Charlotte woke up. They even managed to kiss a few times in between. While they were eating breakfast, the sky darkened and the weather turned bad. It was about to start pouring rain. "Well, since the weather decided to give us the day off, maybe we should rest," Jaden asked. "Let's do something interesting. Maybe there's a good movie on TV?" "Maybe," Laura grinned, "except our TV isn't showing in this bad weather. We can watch something on CDs, though. You go with Charlotte to choose, and I'll put the pie in the oven. Can you tell me what you did with it and where you took it?" Yasmin stood in front of the two huge men and could barely contain herself from scratching her nails into their silly faces. "Yasmin, my girl," a tall, model-looking young man walked into the room. "They are professionals and would never tell an outsider about their business." "I'm an outsider? Is it all right that I paid for their services?" "But I did the order. And this is the first time they've seen you." The young man looked condescendingly at the woman. But when he saw her face growing more and more nervous, he decided not to make her angry anymore. "What do you want to know?" "What have they done and where have they taken my husband?" asked Yasmin sternly and demandingly. "Gentlemen, you may tell this lady everything," the man nodded. "Well, we didn't do anything," one of the men began. "First we injected him with a highly potent drug. He could have died from it alone. Then we threw him in the car and took him to a secluded place. When he regained consciousness a little bit, we beat him up and injected him again. Then they sent him away by helicopter. They said they dumped him in an unknown area. Even if he survived the injections and beatings, he couldn't survive there." "Who thought of that?" Yasmin's eyes grew huge with surprise. "We always take our reservations there." "They haven't found one yet," one of the bandits answered proudly. "And now we need them to find them," began Yasmin, squealing. "But that's impossible. He must have been eaten by beasts long ago." The second bandit replied in surprise. "Then we must find the bones." Yasmin hesitated. "All right. I'll file a wanted notice with a reward. And you go to the place where they threw him out and find something. You'll get another reward while you're at it." The men looked at each other and were about to object, but Yasmin's angry look stopped them. "All right. Let's try it," said one of them. "I don't need to try. I have to bring it in." "Aren't you a little pushy about spending your husband's inheritance?" the guy pronounced as the door closed behind the two men. "First you spend a lot of money to clean him up, now to find his corpse." "And don't count my money," replied Yasmin angrily to her lover, but corrected herself in time, afraid that he would take offense. "It won't affect your life in any way. Albert, you told me to let you know if anything interesting happened. Well, here it is." Two bandits came to this Yasmin's apartment. "You know, the one where she and her lover hang out." "I know them. They don't do good things. They help people disappear. I sent my men after them, just in case." "You did the right thing. Maybe they'll get a lead on Charles." "Most likely. They went to a private airfield. The owner of the airfield is a local authority." Half an hour later, a helicopter takes off from the airfield. "Is there any way to track it?" "I'm on it now." "Thank you, bro. I'll owe you one." "I'm always glad to help you." Jaden dreamt again of the monster with the woman's face. Shuddering, he woke up and looked around. He was half lounging on the couch in Laura's living room. Laura herself and Charlotte, cuddled on either side of him, were asleep. The television screen glowed dead blue, letting him know that the movie they had turned on had long since ended. Jaden carefully, so as not to disturb his girls, got up and walked around the room, stretching his body and looking around curiously. The room was small, with a large window across from the door. To the right of the entrance was a sofa with two armchairs on either side, and on the left was an old closet, divided by a nightstand on which stood a television. In the wall, in addition to the traditional dishes and books, were pictures. Jaden stood closer to examine them closely. Here was Laura, still very young. Fear mixed with happiness in her eyes. Beside her stood a huge boy, confidently hugging her by the shoulders. Apparently, this is her husband, Alfie. Jaden felt something akin to jealousy. No, boy, unfortunately, you're no match for me anymore. Nearby was a picture of them with little Charlotte. The rest of the pictures were just of her. Jaden was about to walk away when suddenly some glint behind one of the picture frames caught his attention. He carefully opened the closet door and held out his hand. It was a massive gold watch. It was an expensive one, he felt. There was no way it could have belonged to Alfie. He looked at it closely. Somewhere in his mind there was a strange picture. Oh, I forgot all about it. Laura got up from the sofa. It's your watch. At least, you were wearing it when you were at my fence. You gave it to me with your clothes when you changed. I put it away and must have forgotten. You didn't remember them either? No, said Jaden thoughtfully. Where did I get that watch? I don't know. Maybe you bought it yourself. Or it's a gift. Well, I'm going to go make dinner. We slept all day. What are we going to do at night? Grumbled Laura, heading for the kitchen. Jaden put the clock down and followed her. Don't worry. I'll find something to keep you busy tonight, he said quietly, grinning, coming up behind her and kissing her neck. Laura blushed. Releasing herself from his embrace, she decided to change the subject to a less exciting one. We must try to find out who you are after all. Maybe you have family, relatives who are looking for you and worry. It's from worry that I haven't been found yet, Jaden replied angrily. Seeing that he had frightened the girl with his tone, he corrected himself. If that watch belongs to me, I don't think my relatives are very interested in finding me. In any case, I won't try to find out anything about my past. I'm quite satisfied with my present. After dinner they drank tea and chatted for a long time. The rain began to fall again. Fortunately, it had an effect on Charlotte, who had been asleep all day. And she fell asleep almost immediately after supper, which pleased Laura, who was worried that her daughter would not go to bed for a long time because of the afternoon nap. While Jaden took Charlotte to her room, Laura washed the dishes and cleaned up the kitchen. He approached her silently. And when his hands were on her shoulders, she shuddered, but immediately her whole body was filled with warmth. His lips touched her neck, and she forgot all about the world. I think it was here, the pilot shouted to the two huge men who sat behind him, also peering into the woods. There, that clearing. Are you sure? One of the men shouted. The noise from the propeller of the helicopter in which they were seated was hellish. Last time we flew in at night. You could practically see nothing. Look at the crooked tree. It's not in a clearing or a forest. If it were not for the height, I would have thought it was a person. It's very similar. Then let's go down. There was no sign of human remains in the clearing. After exploring the area, the men returned to the helicopter. Maybe he made it to the woods somehow? We need to search the forest. At least 100 meters from this place. It's easier to leave something in the forest, catch clothes, hurt yourself. One of the men began swearing foully. No. How long has it been? It's been a long time since everything dried up and the wind blew it away. Are we going to be all over the woods picking up his remains? You don't understand. She needs proof that he's dead. Otherwise, she might doubt that she paid us the money for a reason. That's her problem. Let her doubt it. Well, no. I know ladies like that. Nothing can stop them for money. And our chief does not need such problems. And he won't need us if she starts arguing. All right. You convinced me. Let's go take a look around the clearing in the woods. A few hours later, having found nothing, the men approached the helicopter. Maybe you got the wrong clearing, one of them asked the pilot. Maybe there are more clearing like that. I don't think so, replied the pilot. I'll look at the map just in case. All three of them leaned over the map. And what's that? One of the guys pointed to a rectangle on the edge of the sheet. That? A village. About 10 kilometers from here. And you didn't say anything? So? You wanted the forest, didn't you? I took a map of that part of the forest. Why do you want the village? Fool. And if he could get there? Then you've got him too lively. The pilot tried to laugh, but changed his mind when he saw the fierce look in one of the passengers' eyes. Let's visit that village. You never know, what if we're lucky? For a week now, Laura had felt like the happiest woman alive, as if she had grown wings behind her back. She woke up and fell asleep in the arms of the gentlest, most caring, most passionate man in the world. She could no longer imagine how she had lived all this time without him. It seemed as if she had been asleep before, and now she was awake. From time to time she became terrified of losing everything in one moment and being alone again. But she stubbornly chased it away and continued to enjoy life. Be that as it may, she decided, if you're so afraid of everything, it's better not to live at all. You've fallen in love with your resident, haven't you? Aunt Eva winked cheerfully at Laura as she poured milk into her bucket. What does it show? Confused Laura.
Ha!
I can tell. I can see it in you. You're all glowing and smiling all the time. Be careful and know your limits. He's not from around here anyway. Even though he's nice, you can tell he's one of those, like on TV. He'll remember everything and go home from our village. You'll be left, Laura, with a broken heart and a ruined reputation. Aunt Eva, why do you say that? I don't wish you any harm. I just want to bring you down to earth a little bit so you don't get your hopes up too high. He's obviously not old. What if he's got a wife, kids? Even if he does have feelings for you, who do you think he'll choose when his memory comes back to him? Laura stopped smiling. She looked sadly at Eva, took the bucket from her, and walked toward the exit. There she turned around and, smiling tautly, a little louder than necessary, said, "Let it be as it is now. At least I'll be happy for a little while." And loved. Well, good, Eva decided that she needed to support the girl. You, if anything, do not hesitate, come. I'll help you with everything. Thank you, Laura said quietly and calmly, and went out. At night, as she settled comfortably on Jaden's shoulder, she remembered this conversation. Jaden, what will happen when you remember everything? Asked Laura and froze, waiting for an answer. I don't know. It depends on what the memories will be. I don't think they'll be good, but I'll accept them. Maybe I'll have to make up my mind about the rest of my life. Make some changes, rethink some things. That's not what I meant. I wanted to know what's going to happen to us. Laura felt like she was going to cry. Jaden, as if sensing her condition, rose slightly and leaned over her. And what will happen to us? I think everything will be the same. Unless, of course, I've done something in my past life that would drive you away from me. Then I'll ask for your forgiveness, so that you can be with me again. Mine. He pressed his lips to hers, not giving her another chance to ponder the subject. In the morning, as usual, Laura gathered Charlotte and took her to kindergarten. Jaden left the house, too, and went to work. As he walked almost halfway, he saw two huge men moving toward him. They were clearly not locals. In the few months he had lived in the village, he had become acquainted with all the inhabitants. Sensing danger, Jaden inwardly braced himself. The men approached swiftly. When no more than 5 meters remained between them, Jaden realized that they recognized him. Mentally preparing himself to repel any action they might take, he strode toward them, trying to look calm. One of the bandits reached out his hand to grab him. Jaden, several men, his colleagues, emerged from the gate of one of the houses. Wait. We have a case. The men, who were walking toward him, stopped Jaden abruptly. Can you tell me where the store is? So you passed it. There it is. Jaden pointed toward the local store a few hundred yards away. Whose are you? One of Jaden's partners who approached was as curious and simple-minded as any villager. And we're from town, one of the men replied. We're here to fish. You're useless. The fish aren't biting right now. It's out of season, replied comrade Jaden. We don't need fish, but an excuse to get together. Laughed the bandit.
Ah.
I see. Good luck, men. The bandits turned toward the store, looking back at Jaden and smiling wickedly. Well, here comes the past. And from the looks of it, not a good one, thought to himself Jaden. Laura began to ask questions. Laura, Jaden chilled. It wouldn't be hard for these thugs to figure out where and with whom Jaden lived. It turns out that his girls might be in danger. Something must be done immediately. Some strange voice in his head shouted to him, "Clock. The watch. Get the watch." After asking Patrick to leave, Jaden ran to Laura's office. When she saw Jaden, Laura was surprised, but her heart raced anxiously. She knew something had happened. Jaden. What's the matter? She quickly went out to him. Laura. You need somewhere to hide with Charlotte right away. My past. It found me. And it turns out it's very bad. Jaden recounted this morning's encounter in short order. Why just us? What about you? Laura wondered frightenedly. I've got to get back to the house. I've got to get my watch. I don't know what's in it, but I feel it's our salvation. Okay. I don't think they're going to do anything to you yet. They're probably the enforcers. They'll be waiting for orders. In the meantime, we'll go inside and get ready. I've got a gun. People will come running at the shots and call the police. Jaden stood in indecision. Laura was right. But they couldn't stand up to trained thugs. Either way, they should go home, looking for help on the watch. Alive? Yasmin leaned back in her chair. Wow, what a survivor. She drummed her fingers on the table nervously. Her interlocutor waited silently. His men had helped her husband disappear, at the lady's request. He didn't mind, she paid well. But now, only a couple of months later, she suddenly told him to bring the remains. The guys agreed, but decided to discuss it with their boss. This was the first time they'd had such an unusual order, and they were worried it would end in trouble. Bruce, who was the boss of the men Yasmin hired, agreed after deep thought. But he told them to tell him everything first. And so, a few days later, as the boys flew away, word came from them that the battered, drugged and thrown out man was alive. There was some serious thinking to be done here. Why hadn't he informed his own, called for help? Couldn't he? I don't think so. Nowadays you can get in touch with practically anyone from anywhere in the world. The guys said he recognized them, so he remembered how he got there. Or maybe Bruce is already under police scrutiny. And while this man is out there waiting for them to threaten him again. Yasmin, he turned to the woman without waiting for any suggestions from her. I have a very good sniper. Maybe? I've thought about it. But first you have to secure yourself so that you won't be left without money. I'll draw up the papers by which he gives me all his possessions, and then we'll finish what we started. Let your boys take a walk in the meantime. Where did you say they are? After Bruce left, Yasmin called and booked 2 plane tickets. The flight was due in 2 days. In the meantime, it was urgent to find a notary who would make a deed of gift to Yasmin from her husband without too many questions. Jaden twisted the watch in his hands and couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. He'd taken it apart and put it back together twice, but he hadn't noticed anything unusual about it. With a doomed sigh, Jaden wound up the mechanism and put the watch on his hand. The bandits did not appear again, but that gave no hope that he was mistaken. He sensed that the boys were coming for him. Maybe we should go away, Laura suggested to him. I have an aunt in a distant city. We could stay with her for now. I don't think that's a good idea, kid. They'll be looking for me anyway, and sooner or later they'll find me. It's better to find out now what they want from me and, if possible, give it to them. I don't want anything bad to happen to you and Charlotte. I'll go to any of their terms, just to make sure you're all right. We won't be all right without you, Laura lowered her eyes sadly. Then I'll be with you. Jaden pulled her to him and kissed her. From the day he met the bandits, he moved into Laura's house. They locked the front door at night and let Maggie the dog off the chain. They locked all the windows and doors, and always had a gun by the bed. Laura agreed with the neighbors that if they heard any bad noises, they would call the police from town right away, and then they would ask what happened to them. Albert, good afternoon, a familiar voice was heard in the phone. And I'm glad to hear you. Did you find something out? Yes. I do not know if this information will be useful to you, but we found out where the helicopter landed. I texted you the coordinates. Thanks, I appreciate it. Wait and see. Albert opened the message and put the coordinates into the search engine. Wow. So that's really far away. Maybe Bruce has some territories of his own there? Maybe. Just see, there's a big city about 500 kilometers away. Hearing an affirmative answer, the speaker continued, today your Yasmin took 2 plane tickets to that city. For herself and her lover. You think they're going to visit Bruce? I wonder. Should we check it out? Sure. Officially or on our own? Let's do it ourselves. Now. We've got to get ahead of this money hunter. All right. Get ready. I'll pick you up in an hour. Albert smiled contentedly. Something told him he was on the right track. The computer beeped, notifying him that a message had arrived. A map came up on the screen with a flashing red dot on it, the sign of his boss. It was the sign Albert himself had inserted into Charles's watch. Only Charles and himself knew about it. The only condition was that the watch should always be on. So Charles was very careful to make sure it was on. When he disappeared, so did the sign. Apparently, the clock had stopped and there was no one to wind it. And then today someone started it. The beacon worked and indicated the location of the clock, not far from where the helicopter had landed. We'll fight another war, Chief, Albert said quietly and left his office. An hour later, the military helicopter with Albert, his army friend, and a couple of other tough guys was in the air. Laura woke up to Maggie barking. It was dark, and she couldn't tell if she was dreaming or if it was really happening. Jaden, she called softly. I hear it, he answered just as quietly from the window. I can't see anything, but there's definitely someone at the front door. Oh, my God, Laura stood up frightened. What to do? Calm down. Get dressed and wait for me. I'll go out and find out who it is that came to visit us at night. Laura wanted to object, but Jaden quickly came up to her, kissed her, and whispered, Don't be afraid. Everything will be all right. Jaden took the gun and, trying to move as quietly as possible, left the house and walked to the front door. From the other side his presence was felt. Charles. It's Albert. Open up, please, came a quiet voice. I'm sorry, but there is no Charles here. Jaden answered cautiously and moved away from the gate in case they decided to shoot. There was a rustling sound behind the front door, and then a small folder flew over the fence. Jaden picked it up and opened it. There were pictures in there. Each picture showed Jaden and some man in different life circumstances, on a hunt, in an office, at some banquet, in an army uniform, at a desk. They were the same, only still very young. Charles, you're in danger. Open up, please, I'll try to explain. The voice was familiar, but Jaden couldn't remember who it belonged to. Still, listening to some inner instinct, he opened the door. 4 men entered the courtyard. They were in camouflage and armed. One of them walked up to Jaden, put his arm around him, and patted him on the back. Well, hello, Chief. Glad to see you're alive and found. The man stepped away from Jaden and looked at him, squinting, and asked, You don't remember anything? No, Jaden shook his head. He was about to ask something else, but an excited Laura came out on the porch. Jaden, she called out. The man looked at the girl. Why don't you let us in the house? There's a lot to tell. All right, Jaden indicated with his hand, urging them to follow him. When everyone was seated in the living room, the leader of the little troop began his story. I'm Albert, I'm your deputy and friend. You and I have been friends since high school. We went to the army together, only you went to civilian service after demobilization, and I stayed to work under contract. 10 years later, I was released from service because I was wounded, and you got me a job as your deputy. At that point, you already had a well-developed, well-run business and a divorce under your belt. A couple of years ago you remarried. Your new wife turned out to be very mean. She's the reason you're here now and you don't remember anything. I tried to talk you out of marrying her, but you wouldn't listen. Then I gave you a watch with a pointer that told you where you were. I just don't understand why that pointer didn't turn on sooner. Because I only put it on yesterday. And I guess I started it. I see. So when you were kidnapped, the watch hit something and stopped. The tracker went off. Why didn't you put it on until yesterday? Because I didn't know what it was for, and for the area I'm in now it's too inappropriate. I see, Albert nodded and continued, well, your wife wanted to take all your money. Only there was no way she could do that. Your first wife married well and went abroad. For your money she would not claim. Therefore, your only heir is your current spouse. She decided to take you out to make you disappear. But she's so stupid, she couldn't even consult a knowledgeable lawyer before doing it. So, yes, she got rid of you, but she can't inherit. For that you need to be declared deceased. And they can only do that if your remains are provided or after 5 years. How did she get rid of me? You were stunned, drugged, beaten, and drugged again and brought here. You were supposed to die. But you were lucky and miraculously survived. With complete memory loss, of course. Now she needed your remains to present them to the notary so she could inherit them. She sent Bruce's people here and they found out you were alive. She's on her way here now, too. I assumed to get something out of you and finish what she started. Luckily, we got here early. This is Alan, my buddy. We were in the service together. He tracked down your wife. And these are his boys, Dan and Gilbert. Jaden shook the men's hands. What you told me clears up a lot, but unfortunately, I don't remember anything at all. I get some sounds and pictures in my head, but that's all right. As soon as we take care of your wife, we'll find you the best doctor and he will give you your memory back. And now let's get ready for our guests. In the morning, Laura took her daughter to kindergarten as usual. She felt completely shattered. The events of the night had made her anxious. Even though Jaden had persuaded her to get some sleep, Laura still felt as if she hadn't slept in a week. The overnight guests, so as not to frighten the child, left with Jaden for the summer kitchen. After kindergarten, Laura decided to go to work and to take a day off. She returned home with heavy thoughts and a worried heart. The fact that they were in no danger now did not make Laura happy at all. Everything she had heard tonight about Jaden Charles left her with no hope of a future together. Who was he, and who was she? She didn't fit into his life at all. She wasn't right for him. Only in a fairy tale could Cinderella count on a prince. In real life, the prince needed a princess just like himself. The social gulf separating her and the man she fell in love with was too wide. Were you hoping for something? Asked Laura sadly to herself. And she answered herself, yes. Deep down. Just as she turned onto the street that led to her house, she saw a huge black car approaching. Laura went faster. A spectacular girl, accompanied by the same man and 2 bandits, got out of the car. She walked confidently to the front door and nodded at her guards. They began to knock. Laura had already approached the front door, and it immediately opened. There stood Jaden. Quickly looking over Laura with a disdainful glance, the hottie switched to the man who opened the door for her. Charles. My love. Why have you forsaken me? I am all alone. She strode confidently across the yard to the door of the house. Her entourage followed her, and Jaden himself with Laura. All the while Laura looked anxiously at the man, but his face was impenetrable. Not only that, he didn't even look at her. As soon as Jaden opened the front door and saw Yasmin, it was as if a bomb went off in his head. Pictures of visions and voices came together in a jigsaw puzzle, and he remembered everything. This was the face he had seen in his nightmares. Everything was falling into place. It was as if he had begun to live from the place where he had lost his memory. Only with a lighter head. He did not give away his feelings in any way. His head worked clearly. Charles led the uninvited guests into the house. He waited until Yasmin looked around the room with a contemptuous chuckle and stopped in front of him. A little behind her was seated, apparently her lover. And at the door, blocking the entrance, stood the two thugs he knew. "Darling, you're beginning to lie," replied Charles in tone with his wife. "You're not alone. You have a friend. I think he has brightened up your loneliness quite nicely." "I didn't mean that, my sweet," Yasmin continued, trying to keep her composure after her husband's hints. "You left me without money. And you know I'm as without it as without food." "Well, as far as I know, you've been allocated an allowance. And a pretty decent one at that," Charles grinned. "Well, my love," Yasmin walked over to him and ran her hand over his cheek. Charles continued to stare at her mockingly. Then the woman moved close enough to his face that she had to touch her lips to his, and she mouthed, "I want it all." Charles scornfully moved away from her. "That's impossible, my love." "Why not?" "Because it's not nice to take someone else's." "And who told you it was someone else's?" Yasmin went on to say, "When you die, everything should go to your heirs. And you have one, me. Well, first of all, I'm still alive. And second of all, you're not on my list of heirs." Charles looked intently at his wife. "Well, first of all, the fact that you're alive is not long," replied Yasmin, "and secondly, there is no list. There is a document that confirms that I am the owner of your entire fortune." "I haven't seen such a document." "All right, I'll show it to you." Yasmin nodded to her lover, and he pulled out a stack of papers from the folder he held in his hands. "You'll sign it now, and then disappear again." "Really?" laughed Charles. "No, that's too much." "Well, if you don't want to be nice," Yasmin nodded to the bandits standing at the door. They quickly approached Charles and Laura and put pistols to their heads. "What do you say to that? Or do you want your girlfriend's brains blown right out at you?" At that time 2 quiet clicks were heard, and the bandits fell right at the feet of Laura and Charles. Yasmin looked at them in amazement. Charles, stepping over the bandit, walked over to her and leaned over and said, "Now, smile." Yasmin looked at him incomprehensibly. Albert and his boys, meanwhile, entered the room. "You're being filmed by a hidden camera," Albert said cheerfully, looking at Yasmin and at the same time feeling the pulse on the neck of the bandits. "Good sleeping pills. They'll sleep till the capital." "Oh, you," Yasmin furiously began pounding Albert. "I knew you had to be watched." "I was wrong about you too." Albert dodged her and handcuffed her masterfully. "Come here, my sweetie." He turned to the frightened young man. "What's that got to do with me?" he began to shout. "It was all her idea. I was just accompanying her." "You are a traitor," hissed Yasmin. Hours later, Albert and his friends were loading the sleeping bodies of the bandits and Yasmin and her lover into the helicopter. "Come quick," Albert turned to Charles. "We've got to finish business with these bandits and get on with the business. I've been too busy looking for you to pay as much attention to it as I used to." "That's okay, we'll figure it out." Charles shook his hand firmly and hugged him, patting him on the back. "Thanks, pal." Laura didn't go to see the guests off, and so Jaden walked home alone. It was for the best. He needed to think it over and weigh it all out. Now that he remembered everything, he realized that he found himself in a completely different world, with different people, with a different outlook and values. Laura, the woman who had become his guardian angel, whom he wanted so much, without whom he thought he could not exist, was from another universe. From another world. And Jaden, having become Charles, had absolutely no idea how to merge the two worlds into one. He still wanted her. He still wanted her by his side, but he had to make a choice. Either he stayed in her world and continued to live his life, a complete stranger to him now, but with the woman he loved. or he returned to the familiar world he had built, to his comfortable and prosperous life. Without deciding anything, Charles approached the house. When he entered it, he saw Laura, habitually working in the kitchen. Her face expressed nothing but the usual calm. Charles sat down at the table and watched the girl in silence. He did not know where to begin the conversation. This was the conversation that would determine his future. "What should I call you now?" Laura broke the silence. "Charles. But you have the right to call me whatever you like." "Whatever you like. You gave me a second birthday. Grandpa Matthew gave you a second birthday. But I'm still gonna call you Charles." "Since that's your real name," Laura turned away, continuing with her household chores. "She's right, after all," rejoiced Charles. "I must go to the hermit and consult him. I'll visit him tomorrow." "Can I help you with anything?" Encouraged by his hunch, Charles asked. "Thank you, no need," Laura smiled softly. She acted as if nothing had happened. But in her heart she waited to see what he would tell her, what he would decide about their future. Charles said nothing. He behaved in his usual way. In the evening, after dinner, they watched television until Charlotte fell asleep. Then Charles took the girl to her room and returned. He sat down next to Laura on the couch, hugged her, kissed her gently. The kiss became more insistent, the caresses more intimate. Laura no longer understood or wanted to understand what would happen next. There was only them, two people who loved each other. "I can't do it without her. My world is her." Charles now knew what he had to do. "We need to discuss our future." He felt the girl tense. "I don't want to force you into anything, but..." Charles looked at the woman practically asleep on his chest. "You and Charlotte have become very dear to me. I can't do it without you. You are a part of me. That's why I want you to come with me." "With you?" Laura, perplexed, raised her head. "But I thought you would stay here." "You know I can't. I have a huge corporation to run. It's my business that I built from the ground up. I just can't leave it to outsiders." "What about Albert?" asked Laura timidly. "Albert, of course, is a good manager and a true friend of mine, but he doesn't know all the business. What he has is quite enough for him. He's not eager to create something new, somehow improve on something old. He's great at helping me, but I feel like it's none of his business. I understand that he's just trying to help me and make my life easier. But really, he would love to live here. I, on the other hand, want to create something new, to modernize something old. But that's not realistic here. I want you to come with me." There was silence. Laura was silent. Charles did not break her contemplation. At last the girl said, "I can't live there. It's not mine. I'll help you. I'll do anything to make you and Charlotte feel good. You'll get used to it and you'll like it. Come on, let's try it." "I'm afraid, I'm with you. I'll always be with you." Charles pulled her tighter against him. In a pinch, "We'll come back." "All right," Laura sighed, "I agree. I'll try to enter your world." "Lucky you are, Laura." Amelia looked enviously at her neighbor. "Who would have thought your guest would turn out to be a rich man of the capital?" "That's not the happiness of it. Believe me, it is. Don't take everything life gives you." The whole village came to say goodbye. Patrick practically cried and shook Charles's hand. "You, Charles, don't forget us. Maybe your business project will find a use for us, too. You've learned yourself that the village is slowly dying. I heard you. And I get it. Naturally, I will not bypass you. Don't hurt Laura, though." Patrick added. "Laura is my life. I owe my best life to her." They left in the morning. Elder Matthew looked sadly at the trail of the departing plane. He knew they would be back. Both of them. After a week in the capital, Laura realized she had come here for nothing. This was not her life. The city suffocated her. She felt so alone that she wanted to cry. Charles was now and then at work, now and then at court. He'd only come home for the night. He made love with her, kissed her, and fell asleep as a happy man. Laura, on the other hand, was lying awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, and thinking. In the morning, after a quick kiss from Laura, Charles ran off. Laura was left to herself for the day. The helpers did everything around the house, and she had nothing better to do than play with Charlotte. Thus a week passed. Charles returned, as usual, late. Laura was already in bed. She did not go to meet him, as usual, nor did she have dinner with him. She just didn't feel like it. A worried Charles came running into the bedroom. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" "Charles, I want to go home." "But you are home." "This isn't home. This is a prison. You brought me here and left me here. You're gone all the time. Charlotte and I are like prisoners. Why did you bring me here? So you could have an obedient, unpretentious woman at your fingertips? Who won't give you the trouble that your last one did? Who will be happy just to have you around at night?" Laura became hysterical. Charles's gaze went from worried to serious. He didn't know what to answer. Laura was crying, and he sat looking at her in silence. After crying, the girl got up and left the bedroom. She decided to spend the night in Charlotte's room, and in the morning to deal with the matter of returning home. It was not an easy night for Charles. He realized that he had deceived Laura. He had given her false hope that her life would not change much. And he left her to go about his own business. But he couldn't have it any other way. During his absence, so many things had piled up, so many questions had to be solved, and otherwise he could ruin his life's work. Everything he had worked for and done over the years. He could not simply get rid of it. In addition, the trial was not over Yasmin, and he had not yet had time to divorce. But he couldn't lose Laura either. He tossed and turned in bed all night, but he didn't dare go after her. By morning he had found what he thought was the only solution. Rising well before his usual wake-up time, Charles made his way to Charlotte's room. His guess was right. Where else could a resentful woman go in the middle of the night? Only to her child. Laura was asleep in the chair beside her daughter's bed. Charles carefully took her in his arms and carried her to his bedroom. "Where are you taking me?" Laura, feeling she was being carried somewhere, woke up. "Quiet. You'll wake everybody up," whispered Charles. "We're going to our bedroom. I've thought of a way for us to be. I'm the one who came up with the idea. I'm coming home." They had already arrived, and the girl, breaking free from his embrace, sat down in a chair. Charles crouched down in front of her and took her hands in his. "No. You're not going anywhere." His voice was soft, but intransigent. "I agree that what I did to you was unfair, promising that everything would be all right. Forgive me and give me a chance to make it right. I'll revise my work schedule. We'll spend more time together. I feel like you're hostage. And your au pairs, I feel like they're looking at me weird. I'm sorry. I was so happy I forgot to mention your role in the house. You are the mistress of the house now, and you are entitled to do whatever you want. I'll get you a chauffeur to take you wherever you want." "No way. And what do you really have to do while I'm away?" "Well, not householding, after all. I have people specially trained for that." "Yes? And if I want to do this very household? If I want to cook for you? If I want to clean my own room? Do whatever you want. I'll notify the staff." "Really?" "Well, of course. I'm sorry I didn't do it right away. It's just that my ex-girlfriends weren't that modest. Now, come here. I've been without you all night. Just a little more, and I can't stand it." At breakfast, Charles called for the maid and all the staff working in the house. "Please forgive me for not introducing you to the mistress of the house at once. This is Laura, my future wife. From now on, all instructions will come from her, and all questions about the household should be discussed with her. Everyone gave a serious nod and dispersed. There you are. You're a full-fledged mistress now and you can command. Charles smiled. I'm not much of a commander, of course, but I'll try. And what did you say about a future wife? Well, we're not going to live as roommates all the time. Now I'll settle things, and you and I will get married. Is that how you proposed to me? Laura looked sadly at the man, original. Ignoring her words, Charles finished his breakfast, got up, walked over to Laura, kissed her on the cheek, and said cheerfully,
Bye.
I'll try to come back early tonight. We'll go out tonight. Charles, as promised, returned early. Girls, dress up. We're going to the cinema. Overjoyed, Laura and Charlotte went to get dressed. When they came out to Charles, he could hardly restrain himself from voicing his negative opinion. He hadn't paid attention before, but now the stark contrast was horrifying. Is something wrong? Asked Laura frightenedly, looking at Charles's shocked face. Well, girls. Your fashions are very different from the local ones. Let's go shopping first. Are you saying you're ashamed of us? Laura almost cried with resentment. Charlotte, looking at her, was offended, too. Sweetheart. Why do you exaggerate? Charles came up to her. It's just that if in your village you looked like everyone else, here you will stand out and draw attention to yourself. If you don't mind the increased attention of others, fine. It's just that the great distance is the cause of some of the differences in fashion. Okay, I get it. I look like a country girl. Let's go dress us up like the best princesses ever. Laura smiled. Great. Let's go. Charles sat with what must have been his 10th cup of coffee and watched his girls choose their clothes. Laura, shy at first, tried everything on, admired it in front of the mirror, paraded in front of Charles, and laughed. Charlotte did the same. Charles was happy. He used to avoid shopping with his women. But now he just enjoyed the joy the girls gave him and rejoiced with them. I didn't think shopping could get so tired. Laura sat in front of the boudoir table in her new shirt. Neither did I, replied Charles, laughing, but I guessed. And though I was just sitting and watching, I was still tired. I don't know anything. There's no way to thank you. I won't even try. The next morning Laura woke up before Charles and headed for the kitchen. I'll make my own breakfast, she said to the helper. The latter, with a disgruntled look at her new hostess, left the kitchen. But the girl paid no attention to this. When Charles awoke, breakfast was waiting for him. Oh. I immediately remember our breakfasts in the country with you, he said, smiling.
Yeah.
What's there to remember? I didn't make any delicacies for you, smiled Laura and went over to kiss him. There you were, and your soulful atmosphere. I felt so good and at peace. I sat there dreaming of getting you into bed. For weeks it was my hobby. Charles. Stop it. You're happy again, so I'm happy too. You've made my house your own. I'm glad. We'll celebrate tonight. We're going to a restaurant tonight. Great, thought Charles on the way to work. Laura will get used to this life, and all will be well. Laura. I have an important appointment with my partner today. Please be ready by 7 p.m. Charles was hurrying to work, and Laura was seeing him off, as usual. All right. Charlotte and I will pick out our dresses for tonight. I'm afraid Charlotte will have to leave it at home. This event is for adults. Children are a little inappropriate. But who will she stay with? Little one. There are plenty of nannies in the house. I assure you she will be well looked after. But she's never stayed with strangers. Are they strangers? Don't worry. Everything will be all right. In fact, it would be a good idea to find a nanny for the girl. You're the girl of a businessman. Together we will have to go away often for such events. Contact an agency and find a good and reliable nanny. Charlotte. After kissing Laura on the cheek, Charles left for work. The worried girl was left standing on the doorstep. Fortunately, the girl agreed to stay with the maid. Laura went to pack. They say Charles met you in the village. Laura stood at the reception, surrounded by the metropolitan wives, mistresses, and cohabitations of bankers, oligarchs, and politicians who had come to the reception. Almost immediately Charles, after apologizing and telling her to settle in, joined a group of businessmen like himself. Yes. Before I met Charles, I lived in the country. How fascinating. And how do you like the men there? Normal. I heard that village women, because of the lack of normal boutiques and the impossibility of flying out to Italy for shopping, are forced to wear only fur clothes. And they have to wear jewelry made out of uncut diamonds. What a horror, one of the ladies muttered. Really? It must be awful to live with such fashions. Another woman joined the conversation. Laura, how did you put up with all this? Yes, she was fine. Another socialite joined in the discussion. At least it was really natural furs and stones. You didn't have to worry about getting a fake, did you, Laura? The girl was confused and did not know what to answer. Such events, which were becoming more and more frequent, greatly disturbed Laura. Charles invariably left her surrounded by ladies just like her, and they met when they were going home. Laura did not understand a word these women were saying. To her, all these brands, resorts, and gossip were completely incomprehensible and alien. The scent of various perfumes and voices gave her a headache. But she smiled at everyone and even tried to keep up these conversations. It wasn't going well. Charles, I have a headache. Can you go alone? Laura asked one day, bravely. What's wrong? He worried. Shouldn't we call a doctor? No. No need. I'll take a pill and go to bed early. I think I'll be all right tomorrow. Okay. I'll try not to stay up too late then. From that day on, Laura began avoiding appointments. They practically stopped seeing Charles. Sometimes he wouldn't even stop by the house and go straight out. To avoid being bored alone, Laura enrolled in a foreign language course. She enrolled Charlotte in a children's club. While Laura was taking the course, Charlotte was studying with her peers. Then they ate somewhere together and went to a movie, an exhibition, or the theater. Why have you been going so long without your girlfriend? One of Charles's companions asked at another reception. Did you send her back to the country? No. She just has other things to do. What kind of things? Did she have piglets in your house for guests? Or did she turn the garden into a vegetable garden?
Ha! Ha! Ha!
Laughed the partner of his joke. Seeing that Charles was unpleasant, he clapped him on the shoulder. Don't be offended. But she really is kind of strange. You should have at least hired special people to adapt her to society. Actually, that's my future wife you're talking about. Charles tried not to show how offended he was by the remark. Dash, which one is she, anyway? And it certainly wasn't your last. If you wanted something special, why get married at once? Especially, to people like her, in my opinion, and acquaintance with you, already a great happiness. She lives on everything ready-made, a beautiful house, servants, water, food, clothing, not a life, a paradise, compared to her village. Remind me again, why did I make business with you? Charles really wanted to hit him. I'm kind of confused. Charles sat in one of the bars with Albert. On the one hand, Laura doesn't fit into this life at all, but I can't part with her either. On the other hand, my corporation demands attention and all social norms. I don't know what to do. Sort out your relationship with Laura first. You're the one who brought her here. You're responsible. Why did you bring her here in the first place? I wanted her around. What did she want? Albert looked at Charles expectantly. He wondered. Without waiting for an answer, Albert continued, You're a grown man. You're not in your 20s or even 30s to be so rash as to carry out your desires. When she let a strange man into her house, she was fully aware that she was putting herself and her daughter in danger. But she let him in anyway. And she helped you. And did you? How did you repay her? Falling in love with yourself and separating her from her normal life for your desires? What did she get in return? An empty, lonely, alien, but rich life? I don't think that's what she expected. Is it just me, or are you scolding me? Take it any way you like. But my advice to you, solve this problem, decide what you need. Before it's too late. Can it be too late? She'll leave you. And probably pregnant. Pregnant? I said maybe. Or do you think it's the stork that makes babies? If she leaves, you can't bring her back. At least not voluntarily. They fell silent. Albert finished his beer and ordered another. Charles twirled his glass in his hand. Finally, after finishing it in a gulp, he too made a sign to the waiter to bring more. You see that all these social gatherings are painful for her. Why do you make her go to them? She hasn't been going lately. Why do you go there? Is it more interesting for you to be around a cheeky crowd than to be with the woman you love? Or the woman you don't love? But it's one of my main duties to attend these receptions. To be known, to be collaborated with. Huge contracts are often made at such events. New partners are found, useful acquaintances are already made. Charles. Wake up. What partners and acquaintances? You're the partner and the acquaintance. You already have such opportunities that people are looking to meet you and try to establish a relationship with you. Everything you just cited as an excuse for your entertainment can be done quite well in the workplace at the office. And it's more solid, and all the right professionals are there for you, and most importantly, everyone is sober. And it's also all without any panhandling, which is very advantageous. I hear you, Albert. I promise I'll think about what you said. Charles, throwing the money for the beer on the table, got up and went home. Laura and Charlotte were not home. Frightened, Charles asked the maid, "Where are they?" "Well, they go out every day." "They don't tell me," said the au pair, "they usually come back at 8 o'clock." An irritated Charles went to the bedroom. After taking a shower and changing his clothes, he decided to wait for Laura in the living room. Where do they go? And how long had this been going on? Suddenly, the man realized that he had grown quite distant from his girlfriend. It had been a long time since they had spent evenings and weekends together. No wonder Laura had begun to go off somewhere. So, one day, she would indeed, as Albert said, be gone forever. How long had it been since the day he brought her here? 6 months. 6 months. Charles suddenly realized how right his friend had been. Why had he brought her here? To please his ego? To play with a new exotic toy? He remembered the morning in the summer kitchen. Her warm body and big bottomless eyes. Her trusting gaze. Her words, "I agree. I will try to enter your world." And she honestly tried. And he didn't see how hard it was for her. He didn't support her. And she had saved his life. What a fool he was. The only girl who wasn't with him for the money. Charles jumped up and ran to the car. When he returned, Laura and Charlotte were already home, about to eat dinner. "I was told you came and left again. I thought you were having some kind of reception again." Her voice was steady, calm. She spoke because she had something to say when he came in. Charles rushed over to her and sat her down in a chair. He himself sat down in front of her. "Laura. Forgive me. I'm a fool." She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "I forgot about my promises, leaving you alone with the world. I understood and realized everything. I love you. And I can't do it without you. I'll forget this whole social life, I don't need it. It'll just be you and Charlotte and me. We'll have our own fun. Just the three of us. Will you marry me?" Charles took a box out of his pocket and opened it. A dainty ring gleamed on the soft velvet. The man looked anxiously and hopefully at the girl. Laura, at a loss for words from such an unexpected recognition and question, stared at the man in amazement. I honestly don't even know. I thought you had grown cold to me. You realized that I'm not the one for you. No. I'm the one who doesn't deserve you. I've been acting like a narcissist. Should I think about it or not? On what? On your suggestion. Laura laughed, only I still can't predict how you can change what you have to do. I have a huge number of different specialists. Somehow they've managed without me for months. Fine. I'll marry you, but on one condition, the wedding will be in my village. All right. Don't you really mind? Of course not. Especially since I've had some ideas about your village and Albert. What about the guests from your side? It turns out they can't come to your wedding. The bulk of my acquaintances have private planes. Who want to, will come. And who doesn't want to, they don't have to. It's good here. Charles sat in Grandfather Matthew's house and watched the sun disappear behind the woods. Stay. Why do you need all this city hustle and bustle? You've made 3 generations worth of money. Grandpa Matthew sat down beside him. It's not about the money, Matthew. It's what I like to do. It's a great pleasure to realize that you've made something new, improved something old, rebuilt something broken. And Laura. Does she share these aspirations with you? She's a quiet country girl. She's used to a measured life. And here you are, with your work enthusiasm. It seems to me that if Laura really wanted a quiet, peaceful life, she would never have come with me. And she wouldn't have saved me either. She just didn't have the chance to discover her adventurous talent. At Charles and Laura's wedding, the whole village was having fun. Laura was watching the fun-loving guests, leaning against her husband's shoulder. Charlotte, tired from the festivities, was sleeping peacefully in his lap. Laura, I would like to ask you something. Of course. Anything you want. I want to open a tourist base here. We'll build cabins for tourists. We'll breed horses, as well. So are we staying here? No, we aren't. What about your courses and the Charlotte Club? I have a lot of work in the capital. Albert stays here. Especially since he has long wanted a quiet life. A tourist base would be a good alternative for him. If you don't mind, may he stay at your house? Of course. Of course. Let him live as long as he wants. But how will you be without your assistant? It'll be hard at first, but I'll manage. The main thing is to have you and Charlotte by my side. We can't go anywhere without you. We are so lucky that we have found you, that say, laughed Laura happily.
An amazing story, isn't it? Thank you for listening till the end. I sincerely hope that you truly enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate this video. See you in the comments and in new releases.